Strategist A. Scott Bolden joins us, former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party, Republican strategist, radio talk show host Melik Abdul as well. I guess, Melik, the question would be, because Hegseth, even though he had issues, personal issues that were surrounding his nomination, looked to be on his way to being confirmed. The question would be if something like this interrupts that confirmation process. What do you think?
No, it doesn't seem like it unless we hear more. Now, I was one of the ones who were critical of Pete Hegseth, his performance. Actually, in his confirmation hearing, I thought that it was very underwhelming, but I don't think that this is something that will derail him. It probably should have come out sooner, but because you've had so many senators who said that they will support, I think that he'll get through, but he could possibly lose 2 or 3, and then that would derail his nomination. I just don't think it'll happen, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will. 53 is the number, right? So, yeah, you can only afford to lose the 3. Any more than that, and you'd be in trouble. So we'll see. This just came out from Politico. The other thing, that there were just these comments made, Scott. We were talking earlier about all the president's executive orders, but also the January 6 pardons, and particularly those against violent offenders, people who attack police officers and the like. We had a conversation about that. There's new comments that just, I haven't seen this yet, but the Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert just made, apparently, about January 6th. Let me play this clip, and then we can talk about it. Here's what she just said.
If there's another regret, I'm sure it's only on the Democrats who are regretting that they didn't just shut up, because now they're finding out. They messed around, if you will, for 4 years, and now they're finding out.
Now they're finding out. Democrats should have just shut up, Scott. By the way, that scene, we had Brian Enton over there at the D.C. Detention Center at the jail. It's been active here for about an hour or so. A lot of people coming out, cheering and the like. What do you make of what she said, though, Scott?
Well, you can't ignore a violent attack on democracy and the peaceful transfer of power. I've always said the Democrats really had no choice. The Republicans had no choice. But the Republicans embrace power and want to rewrite history about what happened on January 6th, whether they're back in power now or when a week or 2 after the attack happened, when their very lives were at stake. It is the height of hypocrisy and the depth of arrogance. And so with new power, with Donald Trump, and with that power comes his commuting their sentences and
right,
pardoning them. It's just really a sad day in history. Blue lives really don't matter.
Yeah, how do you view that? Especially, again, this is not just people that were, trespassing or whatever it may be. Like we talked earlier about, there was people, to Scott's point about blue lives, people who attacked police officers. We didn't know how far Trump would go on this. The power of the pardon is a far-reaching power for any American president, but it doesn't mean that every pardon is justified or right, even though you can do it, and it doesn't mean you can't talk about it and debate it afterwards, right? So how do you view it, Melik?
Well, I thought that Donald Trump was going to stick to what he and J.D. Vance were alluding to over the past month or so, that Donald Trump was going to pardon those who were convicted of the nonviolent crimes. But that seemed to change, and I'm thinking.
Well, Vance said that. Remember publicly, Vance. That wasn't that long ago. But yeah, go ahead.
And a number of senators had expected that too. But I'm thinking that may have changed some leading up to the inauguration. But definitely by the time Joe Biden pardoned his family for crimes they have not yet committed, I thought that the Democrats lost. And in fact, when Joe Biden pardoned Hunter for anything going back to 2014, I thought that in that particular moment for them, it was a bad move, and Donald Trump was going to do exactly what he did.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my bet,
Malik,
I'm thinking he would have done that anyway, Melik. I would think, it just happened last night, that it wouldn't be related to the pardons from Biden. I get your point that what Biden did might not be a good look on the way out, pardoning his whole family. But Scott, what would you say about the comparisons between the two, if anything?
Yeah, Melik, that's a false comparative, and I understand the politics of where you stand and where I stand, but this transcended politics, right? This is an attack on democracy, an attack on police officers, really an attack to try to get to the Vice President Pence, an attack to stop the transfer of power. These people were committed, and they were violent. Everyone wasn't violent, but the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys and these other organizations who got 10, 20 years in jail were really bad, violent people and have no regrets about it. And many of them have been interviewed and said they have no problem doing it again. You simply cannot have that type of bad behavior, and that's an understatement, of violent behavior, and then say they're hostages or that they're political prisoners because they went to commit violence and stop the transfer of power. Let's not do that. Let's agree that that was a violent day, and whether he should have pardoned them or not, let's agree that he probably should not have pardoned all of them because they did damage to our democracy and to those who protect that capital.
Yeah, it's a different question whether he should or whether he can. We know he can, and he did. The question, again, doesn't mean that it necessarily makes it right. Now, another thing that happened yesterday, right when we were coming on the air, we did our show from Washington. Elon Musk, he was up on stage at Capital One Arena, and a lot of people started talking about it later in the day. I didn't see it live at the time because we were getting ready to go on because he was jumping around the stage anyway. But he made this gesture, and now a lot of people looked at this. Well, this looks like a Nazi salute that Musk was doing. So it came up today. At least Stefanik's being, her confirmation hearings going on. Trump has her up to be the next UN ambassador. Here's the exchange. Watch.
What do you think of Elon Musk, perhaps the president's most visible advisor, doing 2 Heil Hitler salutes last night at the president's televised rally?
No, Elon Musk did not do those salutes. I was not at the rally, but I can tell you I've been at many rallies with Elon Musk, who loves to cheer when President Trump says we need to send, our U.S. space program to Mars.
Malik, any thoughts on this particular issue and Musk in general here?
Well, I just want to say that Scott and I do agree, which is why I said early on that I thought that Donald Trump was going to just pardon those who were not convicted of nonviolent, the violent crimes. But when it comes to Elon Musk, well, we can actually refer to the ADL. The ADL came out with a statement on this, apparently, about this salute. This is going to be another thing during the Trump administration. We saw, even during the Kavanaugh hearings, people were assuming and alleging that there were people behind Justice Kavanaugh who were throwing some type of hand signal that was supposed to be this white supremacy signal. We're going to see more and more of this type of scrutiny, anything that's done. I think anybody can look at what Elon Musk has done over the past, 6 or 7 months now. This wasn't a Nazi salute, but again, this will be the narrative moving forward where people are going to make these type of ridiculous allegations, and I think that it's appropriate in this case to push back against it.
I don't know what that. Scott, your thoughts? Watching that again?
The narrative, the Republicans keep giving us the narrative that is concerning. If you traffic in racism, if you traffic in sexism, if you use code, listen, look at Elon Musk.
That was a code,
He's
Scott.
doing
that
this.
Was a code.
And you're gonna,
that
and you're gonna,
code,
hey, listen, hold on. I'm not saying what he intended. Only he knows what he intended. But if you make the Heil Hitler signal as part of your celebration, if you make it, you're gonna get that criticism, right? And we know that Donald Trump traffics in racially offensive and sexual offensive terms. I mean, he is the chaos, corruption, and criminal president. And so I'm not surprised at that. I can't tell you whether he was making that signal, but I certainly understand the criticism that comes with it.
You can see why someone else would think, even
that.
he says that he didn't mean it that way, but you could see how someone else, if you saw it on video, how someone could interpret it that way. Anyone who's ever watched anything like that, but you could see that, right? You could see. Let me get this as a last topic. I think this is interesting. All of this said, going back and forth, disagreeing, agreeing, whatever it may be. What about areas of cooperation that we're going to see? Scott, Trump won the election, right, fair and square, and has the majorities in Congress, slim as they may be. I thought it was interesting. I'm going to put this up from a Politico on the Lake and Riley Act, on immigration. Where are we going to see Democrats kind of pick their spots? Why Ruben Gallego's Lake and Riley vote is a warning for Democrats. Gallego said he had zero intention of playing the role of problem child in the same way that Sinema did or Joe Manchin of West Virginia did in previous Congresses. So, First, I thought, here's this new senator coming in from Arizona, maybe set the example of being moderate, or maybe he's going to hear from his own party and say, don't do that. How's this all going to play out with the new Congress and the new president, Scott, from the Democrats' point of view?
Well, we're going to see that real soon. The Democrats would be smart to push for a reasonable border bill, the Langford bill, for example, without going too far to H.R. number 1 that was introduced about 4 years ago. This is a place where majority of Americans want our border safe, and the images of people just coming across the border illegally, that simply won't stand. And we move too slowly on that. I will concede that. So that, I think the immigration is where they can certainly have some bipartisan support. The second part is these wars, the Israeli war and with Hamas, as well as the Russian Ukraine war, where you got a lot of support. And it's okay if Trump takes the win, the war and the killing stops. They can both take credit for it and move forward. Those are two, or rather three, big issues that Dems and Republicans should work on it. And I think the public, Democrats and Republicans, would get a lot of credit, would give them a lot of credit for it.
We'll watch it. Should hear from the president here pretty soon once again. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Melik. We always appreciate it.